In our last video, we played around with dyeing some of these really thin fine art papers from Japan. And I think it's time to break out the encaustic again and do some collage work, because when you collage with these transparent papers, the whites go really, well, this one will go like translucent, this one will go really transparent. This will just disappear and all you see are the red little marks. And it's amazing. Today we're going to work on an L-shaped composition, and I sort of already have it kind of laid out here. I'm working on some 8-inch cradled boards that I've already taped off. I actually recycled these, so there's a little bit of wax on the edges. For my encaustic setup, I have, of course, my Crockpot full of medium here. And I need to get my brushes. I don't need such a giant brush, maybe to start. I'm going to start with the big one and save that for a little bit later. I also have this little Clover iron that I think will be nice to kind of fuse in small pieces of collage. I want to give a shout out to Woo Girl, one of my very first Patreon supporters, and I am so excited to be sharing her information. You can find her on YouTube. I'm putting the link right here, and check her out. It's really fun tarot readings, approaching life really open and embracing the idea of a spiritual guide. I'm always excited when her videos come up on my feed. We'll put this over to the side. Okay, the first thing that we want to do is put in a layer of encaustic. Now, you could absolutely, if this was a clean board, use some glue stick or even some type of gluing medium. But I actually really like just working with the wax. One, if you don't like what you're doing, it's really easy to take it all apart. You don't have to like be sanding away something that's been glued down. And also it just simplifies what you actually need. When I think about my work, it's really important for me to try to use as many sustainable materials as possible. Now, granted, that's not always 100%. I do use PVA. I have matte medium in my studio. I have gloss medium in my studio. I've done a whole art project on plexiglass. That's not sustainable at all, but I do like the majority of my work to be paper and wax. And what we're doing is we're just getting some wax down here on the board. And let's give it a fuse. Now I'm going to use my torch right now, but when we get to the papers, you're going to want to switch to a heat gun because you don't want to burn your papers. Let's fire it up a little bit more. That first layer I like to get really soaked into the wood, so we're just going to overfuse it just a hair. I probably should have warmed up my panel, but it's pretty warm here in the studio today. It's probably 75 degrees. All right, I'm gonna let that cool down a little bit. Before I put on my next layer, once it's cooled down, I really fuse that well. It's pretty warm still, but I want to get this little, I don't know what the heck that is. I'm not too worried about getting my panel ultra smooth yet, because I want to put at least 3 layers of wax on here, and then I'll scrape it back and get a nice smooth surface to start. But we don't want any big ridges, big bumps, things like that. And you'll notice I press my brush to the edge of my crock pot just to kind of take out some of the wax so it's not a big amount. little hole there. I'm just gonna add a little drop right there. And this time we're just gonna do a light fuse. And then one more coat. Now you can see I've got some little bubbles there, a couple little stripes. I'm just gonna let this cool down a bit and we're gonna push it in, but I'm not overly concerned because when I burnish in my paper, it's gonna smush that all down anyways. But you obviously don't want giant bubbles underneath like a big piece of paper because that just creates a lot of problems that you don't want to deal with. I want this piece of paper to go across the whole edge. Now that's not particularly important. I don't know if I want the IBM logo or not. It's kind of fun. I'm gonna just, whenever I'm doing it edge to edge, I always have it so that it overlaps the edge a little bit here. And then I trim it just like 1/8 of an inch, maybe even 1/16 all the way around so that I can have wax on the edge. I found that if I go all the way to the edge, it lifts, and we don't want that after we've been working. So I've got my handy dandy parchment paper. My wax is still a little warm. It's a little warmer than my hand. I probably should wait a little bit longer. But I'm just going to gently start burnishing from the middle with my thrift store spoon. You can kind of see where it's lifting up. All right. That's all I have is my 8-inch ruler here today. So I can see the edge, and I'm just going just a little bit inside. I just take my X-Acto knife and, oops, and trim it. I do find it helps to use the ruler to peel off the paper. Sometimes it lifts up everything. So you can see I've just got this very small edge. And you know, it's completely subjective. You could have a bigger edge. I just don't want a ton. I want this to be the background. Now, if I had a clean panel, I could have glued this down. There's a lot of different glues that are encaustic friendly. I tend to use Yes Paste. There we go. All right, and now we're going to burnish again, and we're really going to pay attention to those edges. Let's get you out of the way. I'll turn you off for a minute. All right. That looks pretty good. You can usually see when it's Now you've got a couple of choices here. Sometimes I'll take my heat gun and actually heat it. You could try, you can see with the iron, the wax comes through. I like doing this because then you can really see if you still need to burnish. I'm going to use the heat gun because it's just a little bit faster than that small little. You can see this edge is not burnished down enough, but we can take our iron here. See, there's a little melty spot underneath. I don't know if you can see that bubble. Definitely want to get rid of that. So if you have a bubble underneath your paper, you can try to lift it and scoot it out, or take a little pin tool and kind of pop it and give some space for that air to go. There we go. Now it's nice and flat. Let's put a layer of wax on top. And then we'll fuse one more time. And we're looking for any bubbles. Once it cools down, I wanted to do an L-shaped composition. I feel like I use L-shaped compositions a lot in my work. I love having kind of a heavy section and then going out into lightness and trying to find that balance. And so for once, I've actually pre-designed this. I don't typically pre-design my collages very often, but I wanted to make sure this one came out unlike the S-curve video. And I wanted to make sure I could use some transparent paper so that you could see how fun it is to combine your hand-dyed special papers with typical collage. So, you know, I get my collages from all over the place, from thrift stores, from recycle stores, from the recycling bin. And so I love this print that came from the Arts of Kenmore. And my plan is to start with this and kind of create this L that you see here. And then bring on lighter elements to just create a little smidgen of interest there. Might work with this, I'm not sure, it might be too strong. I also have this cool tree I printed out on Tengucho paper that I think might be a fun element. Maybe that's too much, maybe we'll bring it back. We'll see. So all fun stuff. So I don't want to burnish this in when it's too hot, but I don't want it to be too cold either. So I think, and typically, I don't like things just sort of floating in space, but I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to line it up with these lines. I feel like it just needs to be. It's almost cut perfectly to line up. That's funny. Didn't even plan that. I'm just going to lightly press it in because the wax is pretty warm. And see what that looks like. And I do have this. I mean, maybe that's too much. I don't know. This is cool. I want to do something with it. But I also want to leave some space here. Maybe it's too much. Maybe we just need that. Let me cut a smaller section. I like that. That's kind of cool. All right, I'm gonna do something with that. Then I think I'm gonna have this blue come out from the edge. I think I need to cut that a little straighter. If you're gonna be straight, right? And I love these little tickets. So I think something like this is gonna be the first layer. Although I don't know how this is going to be. Like, do I want that underneath? Like that. Maybe something like that. That'll be cool. And then we'll be able to see how this Tengucho goes transparent really soon as opposed to waiting to the end. All right, that's getting there. So once again, we're going to burnish. This is kind of heavy paper, so I'm going to have to really make sure that it gets in there. That's not moving. And I'm not going to fuse this. I'm just going to put one layer of encaustic over it. Oh, look at how pretty that is. I'm going to switch to my smaller brush. And then I'm going to put this tree. I don't think I like it upside down, but I like this little divot. Do I want the tree to go off? This divot to go off? I think maybe both go off. All right, so we're gonna line it up with the blue. That looks pretty cool. All right, and we're just gonna lightly fuse this. You have to be careful, or you have to lightly burnish it in. With these really fragile papers, you don't wanna go in pressing super, super hard. You wanna get it nice and flat first, otherwise it can wrinkle or tear. You wanna be gentle. And now we're going to use the heat gun and just gently fuse that in. Because the Tengucho is so light, I might need to burnish that a little more. The wax is just going to come right through it. And you can see how the white of the paper just completely disappears. I mean, that's just magic. This is why I absolutely love working with this paper. You got to be careful with the iron on this fragile paper because it can tear. Let that heat up and then I'll come back to it. While I'm waiting for that, I can trim off these edges. And I can see some little bubble there, or bump. Kind of just press it down with my thumb. Maybe just burnish it in a little bit. It's still a little warm, so we're going to be super gentle. The iron could help with this too. know if you can see it, but it's nice and flat. Now we are going to cover this with wax, but we don't have to do it right away because we have other elements we want to put in here, and the wax has come up through it. This way or this way? I think I want it this way. That's funny, I totally had it going the other way, but I like this pull. It really brings in this L composition by having that little dot be here rather than here. These are just those subtle things that you can do that can really, you know, make a difference. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit because it's not lining up perfectly. So I like that. Don't have to be too obvious about the L. Now you can also wax pieces before you put them on here, but I just really haven't found that to be a real need when I'm working with the papers I choose. But if you have really thick papers, that's something that you can try. It also can be helpful to see what it looks like transparent before you put it down. Now we're just going to wax. And you'll notice I'm only waxing where I've put stuff down. Now if you having a super level surface is important to you, you could certainly wax more, but it's not that important to me, so I just wax where I need to wax so I can keep different layers of translucency. All right, let's fuse. I'm really just looking for like glazed donut. I'm not looking to have to smooth out every brush stroke. What you'll find is if you overfuse, then the paper starts to lift up, and that can cause a lot of issues. You can also, you know, how this kind of bled through and got kind of wet looking, like that can happen too. Like I obviously spent just a little too much time there, but I still have lots of things to do, so I'm not too concerned about it. I don't know if I need that piece. I think this could be part of that L as opposed to just being with more blue. You might want that to actually go off the edge. Look at how cool that is. Or do I like it this way? What if it goes just to the circle? I like that. That's got possibilities. I kind of want it to come a little closer to the circle. It's not quite long enough, but maybe I can piece them together because I have this little piece here. Maybe I can add a little extra section. Okay, let's bring you all the way up to the circle, right to the middle. Okay, I'm going to burnish that in. You know, I laid out this whole design and I'm already changing it. I guess the question is, can I actually redo this with another piece? We'll see. All right, so now I've got, if I just add this here and trim it off, I think that'll work. Or maybe I just extend this part. Okay, let me trim this a little bit more so that it matches up a little bit better. Okay. Now with this transparent paper, you can sometimes see when you overlap. So that's something to be aware of. But I think with this ink, it's so dark. It doesn't quite match up how I wanted it to. Maybe we just do this. guess that was that way anyways. Trim a little more off. I kind of want it to match up. I don't know if it will. Oh yeah, I think that works. Okay. So that's pretty cool. Let's trim off that piece of paper. I don't know if I should fuse it first, but we're gonna try. I'm just gonna try it. Oh, I just pulled off a whole bunch of wax. I think that's gonna be okay. We're just gonna add more wax to it anyways. Okay. That looks really nice. All right, let's do a little wax in. I really love that. You can see how heavy it is on this side. And then, got a couple of ideas. I have these dots that we made in the dyeing Tengucho paper, which we could play around with. I'm not sure if I love that. I have this really delicate flower that I just drew on the paper. I need to trim off. I got a little ink on it, looks like. That we could do something, kind of bring the eye back up to this quadrant. I like that. Is it enough? I don't know. So let's try dipping this. I've got some forceps here. Might tear my paper, I don't know. We're just gonna dip it gently. And we can see how transparent that went. So it's just gonna be like I drew it right on the wax, but it's just drawn, it's on this. So you can kind of give it more of an indication of how transparent it's going to be. Ah, that's pretty cool. I like that, but is it enough? I also have these cool little, maybe we could bring these up. Just trim that down a little. Bring these up from the circle. That's kind of nice. Do I need a little red thing? I don't know. That doesn't look like anything. Or we could have the circle come from there. I really think I want this just to be that. And this, maybe we just need one. Just to make this something fun. All right, I like it. Let's burnish these down. I have to be a little more forceful with the waxed version, a little stiffer. All right, we're just going to scrape some of these dots off. Get rid of that. All right, let's get some wax on this. Let that cool down for just a hair. I'm not loving how that little ridge is. So I'm going to take the iron, really just iron that in, basically. You don't want to press too hard because then you will make a big gouge. Gotta let the heat do some of the work for you. Once again, this is just on low. It's not on high. I think the high is maybe a little too hot for encaustic. You have to read the directions again. I'll clean my sides down just a little bit. I have a little hole there. I'm just gonna take my iron. If I can not stick to everything. I'm just gonna iron it, smooth that out. Sometimes I'll take my iron on the edge, just not even at a 45-degree angle, just slightly beveled. And that can make a really nice finish for your piece. Now, if you fused with the iron, you don't have to fuse more, but I'm going to give this just a light fusing to see. Might be a little too hot still. Let me just make sure that edge is nicely burnished in. I mean, one of the nice things about the iron is that you can kind of push down on those edges, almost like a tectonic plate, and make sure that it's not going to lift up. There we go. All right, so I'm going to give it just one more. I'm going to get my big brush. We give it one final sweep of encaustic and let it cool. And then come back tomorrow and just give it a couple of extra little touches that I think are going to finalize this piece. I've let this cool overnight, and now I've got a nice hard waxy surface, although it's probably 75 degrees in the studio today, so it's a little tacky, but I think it's going to be okay. I could go in and scrape it with my loop tool, but I want to take smaller pieces off. So I'm going to actually just use this razor blade and just be very careful that I don't gouge into the paper. So I'm just going to very carefully just scrape the top layer. And I'm not necessarily needing it to be ultra smooth. I tend to finish most of my encaustic work with cold wax anyways, because I like that matte finish. It really, I feel like, makes the pieces glow without any reflection, which I actually really love. But you could very carefully keep scraping and get just a very smooth surface here. But you just have to be careful that you don't get into the paper. So don't be so obsessive. Now, if I wanted to, I could take my iron and smooth out any bumps. But I think this is working just fine. And you'll notice I'm going in different directions. A little diagonal, vertical, horizontal. I don't know if it's actually necessary. I just kind of like the look of it. And turning it, allows you to see where the high spots are. A little high spot right there. But you gotta be careful when that happens. You have to clean out that wax from your blade, otherwise it makes a mess. And this wax I can actually recycle because it's clean. There's a little raised. And you can see just how tiny of a piece of wax is coming out each time. You don't want to go big here. You want to be gentle. Now I could use oil stick on this. I could do I could do colored encaustic wax, although I really want this lesson to just be wax and paper. But I feel like it needs something, just a little something here. And I don't really want to paint in the flower, but maybe just like a light swath of paint coming through. So I've got these Caran d'Ache watercolor crayons. I don't know if I want to introduce a new color, so I could go with this dark red. I could go with the green. I feel like I have a very pale blue, and I think that could be cool. Let me find that. So I've got this very pale blue because I don't want it to take away from this L-shaped composition, but I feel like it just needs something. And I think I just want to break this and just kind of bring this in a little. Maybe that's not dark enough. Let's try this woody blue. I don't know if I love it, but let's get some water and smooth it. Just kind of veil some of this text. Now, of course, the water isn't going to stick to the wax. You just have to let it dry. But once it dries, I can fuse it in lightly and it should be permanent. I think I like that. I think it just gives that just a little bit more depth there. So that's an L-shaped composition. I planned it out for you this time and I think it was much more successful than that S-curve. I hope you had a good time, and I think you can really see the beauty of encaustic with the transparent dyed papers and how you can make some amazing compositions layering them. We're gonna now for my Patreon subscribers, we're gonna now recreate this in a faux encaustic technique using water-soluble wax for those days when maybe you don't want to play with all the heat, but you still want to play around with a sustainable painting material made out of wax.